Hi there. Welcome back to the Aviation Noob podcast with a new year. Joe and I like to try to switch it up a little bit, and we're going to try a new format this year. Be on the lookout for a number of shorter episodes with a single guest or a similar topic source overall. And what we're going to do is we're going to have one episode that'll be us talking about our week, another episode on a history that we talk to with our guests. If we have any guests that week, then we'll have 1 to 3 releases on the main topic, which is going to be whatever topic we choose that week. It'll be, if it's a guest, it'll be getting to know our guests. It'll be them talking about their specific set of expertise, as well as maybe things that are extraneous to that. That might be a separate episode because we find that kind of stuff interesting as well. And then what we're going to do is we're going to release that over 2 weeks. And at the very end of that, 2 or 3 weeks, and at the very end of that, we will put a release of the entire episode all in one piece, kind of like we usually do. And that's kind of how we're going to go format it from here on out. Let us know what you think in the comments. We look forward to hearing from you soon. And without further ado, let's listen in on episode 100 with Albion Bowers.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Aviationrcnoob podcast. My name is Joe.
And I'm Matt. And we're here with our very special guest. You are at episode 100 of the Aviationrcnoob podcast. And today we have an amazing, we have an amazing guest with us, Al Bowers, who is former chief. Oh, I'm going to probably mess it up, but I'm going to try it. Former chief engineer at NASA's Armstrong Langley Subscale Research Center for Flight. It's close. I know I goofed it up a little. I'm sure you have it better.
We'll fix it later. It's okay.
Good. Welcome to the show, Al.
How far off was he?
Was it close or was it bad?
It was close.
Okay.
I got the key elements, I think. Well, anyway, welcome to the show. I am really excited to have you here. I know Joe's excited to have you here. Half of the people that listen to the show have heard me prattle on about the Prandlt. I'm going to put my finger in the back here because somewhere here is my Prandlt wing. There's also another one. There we go, hanging on the wall behind me. I am fascinated with the work that you've done over the last decade. I would say almost a decade, right? I think.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's hard to believe because it feels like it was only yesterday when I went, wait, they're doing what? With what? And so we were able to speak with Red Jensen earlier, and he kind of wet our whistle, and I'm like, it would really mean so much to me to be able to sit and talk with you, Al, about what you've done. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and joining us today, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Pardon me.
Well, I will say what Matt won't say, which is he's been geeking over you for years. And since we started this podcast, he has been anxious and hoping to be able to have the opportunity to speak with you. So, yes, thank you so much for coming on. And I know myself, Matt especially, and several others that have posted questions are eager to learn more about the Prandlt and your work on it.
Okay.
Yeah. That's so fantastic. Try not to gush. Okay. So why don't we start off like in our normal episode, we kind of start off with what everybody's been doing in the hobby. In our case, it's aviation, remodels, which I have a ton in the background. Al, you may have a different hobby but I would love to know what has been lighting your fire the last couple of weeks. What projects are you excited about? And then Joe and I can talk about the couple things that we've been up to, and then we can we can move on to another exciting piece, which is the history segment. I think you're going to enjoy.
Well, last couple of weeks actually has been very dynamic for us out here on the West Coast, in my family. My you may in the background hear grandkids with my wife, and the reason we have the grandkids right at this moment is my our oldest son and his wife are moving jobs, and
Okay.
so um, our son is law enforcement, and his wife works in aerospace.
Okay.
And so there's a story here, but a young lady used to be my intern, and she ended up when they were dating, they wouldn't tell anybody. They kept it a secret until she was no longer working for me, so
Right.
that this whole thing about nepotism wouldn't come out. And which um, I keep telling her that she's doing a really lousy job at getting rid of her last bad boss. And she is
Keeps
now
you
the
around, huh?
mother. Yeah, she is now the mother of our grandchildren. So there's
That's so
this,
exciting.
it just blows my mind every time this whole thing, and her last name. It took me about 2 years to get used to calling her by my last name, because now she's a Bowers. And
Right.
so yeah, so she's moving from Colorado to Utah, and that literally happened yesterday. And
Wow.
that's why the grandkids are here, because they don't have a house to move into yet.
Yeah.
And so we're going through this whole.
Yeah. It's a transition for everybody, but it sounds like
It
it's a good
is.
one.
It
Yeah.
is.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
incredible to hear. Good. Well, like I said, so that would be something that definitely takes up your weeks for sure. Do you get a chance to do a lot with aviation at this point?
Um.
I know you've retired from NASA, and we'll get into
Yes.
that in a little bit more detail. There's not a whole lot to be, but other than now that you're retired, what do you end up working on or with in aviation?
Well, it's really kind of funny. I have a Friday morning breakfast that I get together with a bunch of aerospace people from all across all sorts of jobs. Um, and usually there's between 6 or 8, or sometimes there's 20. Dick
Wow.
Rutan showed up one day
Oh
and
wow.
for
Yeah.
breakfast with us,
Mm-hmm.
and Berger shows up very regularly. We have one young lady who became an airline captain maybe 8 months ago, and so it's actually very peculiar, really eclectic mix. There's
Nice.
one lady that is working on space junk, and
Right. Yeah. Is it removing it and kind of trying to collect
yes,
it?
yes.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is she came up with the idea that you actually want to haul all that space junk to the moon, and then it becomes raw material for things that they can use, that they manufacturing that's going to happen on the moon. And the fascinating thing was we both kind of had this same idea, that she was looking for some way to be able to do this on, because it's low value stuff for the
Right.
most part.
Yeah.
So you don't want to spend a lot of money trying to move it. And I said, there was this guy, Edward Bell Bruno, and he has this brilliant idea of using just small impulses of
Right.
gravity, and by lining things up with the orbits and hitting your apogee at certain points and just getting these small pulses in gravity from the moon, you actually can alter your orbital position and deliver stuff. And so we
Okay.
actually got in contact with the guy who came up with this idea, and she found him, and he is now a regular consultant on our group. And Edward Bell
That's like
Bruno, he's a professor, and
sci-fi become real, right?
it is. And
I mean,
the
if you look
crazy
at some
thing,
of the short stories about space back in the 50s and 60s, which is,
yeah,
there really were about like you basically jettison yourself in a little pod and you just like inflate a plastic bubble and you live in space in this sort of
yes,
weird habitat. And that was a lot of
yes.
which, and some of that was about, hey, what kind of professions would you have? Other than exploring would be mining and doing this like maintenance of the we'll call it the spaceways, right? Yeah,
Of
that was pretty
hardware,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, really cool.
So, but anyway, this is just some of the eclectic sort of stuff that comes up during our breakfast that we get together, and these breakfasts always turn into 2.5 hour marathon sections of just ideas flying all
Oh
over
my
the
God.
place, and people working on Spaceship Two, and people working on the boom, the
Hmm.
supersonic
Yep.
jet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Was it
very eclectic
QX
mix.
57 or 59, I think is the was the original like
Uh,
test project?
No, well, X-59 is
That's the one I'm thinking of.
yeah, different animal. And
Okay, okay.
I'm actually working with two of the people that are on that. And well, having breakfast with them. And
Okay. Yeah.
we have conversations about all how do
Oh my
when you guys did this on this so and so airplane, how did you solve that? And, okay, here, let me show you.
God.
I'll get
Right.
out the reports and send that stuff to them. And
Oh, nice. Yeah. Well, I
yeah,
mean, that's really exciting because our history project this week is about the X-15. I think I mentioned it to you, and it seems so much like it's an echo of that same
yeah,
passion and drive to do the impossible. And then as you're doing it, you realize all these little like, oh my gosh, how in the world are we going to do this? And the idea is that people that engineers and pilots and whatnot have come up with are really ingenious. And sometimes, it's one of those like you just use bubble gum, man. You just get it
right.
done, you know. And it's funny because it's kind of this mix of all those things. It's pretty cool. Um, really cool. That sounds like a great way to spend. What is it? A weekend morning? Like
Yeah.
awesome.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm a little jealous. Maybe I need to look around and see if I can find something like that around me. I know there's an airport in Boone and they do that kind of thing. They have like I think it's like a pilots meeting or something like that. And they have a museum with probably about like 30 or so aircraft, as well as a lot of models of other aircraft and a lot of great resources and things like that. But it's attached to a real airport, you know, out in the mountains of North Carolina. And it was very enticing when I went to visit to be like, maybe I should come back over the weekends and help them restore a couple planes, because that's part of what they did. It was really neat.
Yeah.
It's one of the original stations for the Piedmont Airlines, as that's part of why I think it has a big presence there. Anyway, okay. Let's see. Joe, what have you been up to? Have you been up to doing much other than
Work and trying not to damage the FT Edge as I've been moving
oh
stuff.
yeah,
Had a table collapse that it
Ooh,
was on in the garage, and yeah, it seems to be fine.
okay.
I think it's going to be all right. It'll be a little while before I can do any sort of testing on it. I'll take this time to pose a idea to Mr. Bowers. I read an article. Sometimes I lay in bed at night and just flip through and see what the recommended articles that come across my screen are. And there was one that the captiony title was definitely eye catching and intended to like click on me, you want to read me, and it was space cable to the moon is feasible. You seem to be aware of what I'm
oh
talking
yeah.
about. And my initial was, well, no, that doesn't work. But then the idea that with the moon being tidally locked, that they could run a cable from the surface of the moon to a Lagrange point, and I guess potentially through it, they would need to do to make it work right,
Right. Right.
and and the
Because
the
you'd have to
forces
support the weight of the
involved.
cable.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so Matt, the way that would work, you
No,
go.
I'm like in my head was originally like when you said that, I'm like, oh, you can't connect the moon and the Earth, or it's spinning too fast for that to really make any sense. But I'm like, okay. But when you're like, no, hook it to a Lagrange point, I'm like, oh, whoa, bring it to a saddle point. That's a totally different ball of wax.
But you have to take
Yeah.
it beyond the Lagrange
Well,
point so that
right.
the gravity forces counter out. It is weird
Equal.
that I guess the primary force is not. It's like within the Lagrange point. I don't know the force
Right.
distribution,
Yeah.
but
The tension force kind of pulling it right, the mass of each end, right, pulling it apart.
mhm.
The highest tension is going to be near the center, where there's more stuff on each end, right?
Yeah, again, I'd have to look
That's really
into it to see
awesome.
what the force distribution was. But their idea with that was being able to use a space elevator starting at the end of that, and you rocket up to it at a point where it's not in geosynchronous, but it's in slow enough orbit that you could get to it and dock
Wow.
and then run the elevator to the moon. And the reason I thought about that was with you talking about the lady that's working on space junk. I My initial thought was, well, I wonder if there's a way to utilize that, put a big net on it, and let it catch stuff. But then I don't know how feasible. But if she's
Right.
not aware, I wonder if that would play anything into her thoughts on that.
Okay, so I was the one that actually worked on some space junk ideas maybe a decade ago. And one of the things that you have this stuff that's moving at several kilometers a second
Hmm.
that you're trying to catch. Well, it turns out that there's these ultra high molecular weight polyethylenes where it's the molecular bonds, and as they shear, you absorb all this energy.
Oh,
And
okay.
okay,
So it's like
and
a energy absorber, like a crash zone almost.
exactly.
Do
And it
they
turns out that
rebond along the chain as they shear?
yes, yeah, because it's molecular.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. So
So
if you're pushing the connection points across each other, as they move, they're rebonding, and that
yes,
rebonding
As
absorbs.
opposed to
yes,
just shearing and splitting.
exactly. Instead of separating, right? Then
Yeah,
you don't have anything. But if it's at the molecular level,
sliding
it's
across.
passing, it's absorbing this energy and then it lets go. And then that turns into heat that it releases. Well, it turns out that the people who came up with this were making armor that would go into the doors of Humvees in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. So they could absorb the energy of IEDs
Right.
and RPGs. And it turns out RPGs, the steel rods, are almost at orbital velocity. And so you're trying to stop something like that from impeding into the occupant space.
And you only got a
Right.
So
few
that
inches to do it.
exactly. And so we were looking at making nets out of this stuff in order to try and grab this stuff as it would go by.
Right.
And that
What
was the
about
proposal I was working on.
that's cool. Well, I mean, not I mean, usually the thought kind of goes towards, at least with the armor and stuff, I'm gonna mess up the word, but I think you'll know what I mean. Is the Ublex, or Ublex is the it's until it's given kinetic energy, it's a liquid, but then when it does, it becomes a solid effectively for that brief moment, and it absorbs that energy across the substance that as it
Right.
hardens. It's kind of almost the reverse, right?
Yeah, in a lot of ways it was. And but
It's
I
so
mean,
cool.
we had found the people who were manufacturing this stuff, and we started talking to them about what the net would be like in order to capture this, this space junk as it was going by. And
Yeah.
so there were pieces like that when Sandy and I first started talking about this stuff, I said, well, this was the work that I had done. And automatically, it started connecting all the pieces. And her
Oh, wow.
proposal was completely unsolicited that she sent in. And she got an NSF grant. I mean, from
That's really
nothing.
cool.
And
Right.
so she's actually working on the problem. I love it.
That's incredible. Ra mentioned that he goes, they're using Buddy Brian. They're also using UHMWPE, I think is what which I'm like, that's a mouthful. I can't even imagine what the full name is. They're using it for body armor as well, the non-newtonium
It
fluidics.
makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Just, I, these are the conversations I wish I had more of during the week. I love this kind of stuff. This is awesome. This is so cool. Joe, I'm so glad you found that article.
Well,
Where were you talking? Why did you talk to me about? Anyway, whatever. No, that's good. That's perfect.
honestly, I mean, it's as much is mostly on me, but we haven't been talking much lately.
No, we've been
Um,
busy.
and honestly, I'm surprised I remember that article, and I was going to flip right past it because it had one of those
Yeah,
clickbaity titles of like space elevators are real, and I was like,
yeah,
yeah, and I
yeah,
went
yeah.
past it.
We've
And
heard that before.
I went past. I said, let me loop back on that. I'll
Yeah,
bite. Let's see what's up.
that picture looks too good. I gotta see.
And then, and up until the point that they mentioned the Lagrange point and going through it, as they were talking about a cable from the moon, I was like, nah, 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 that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then they said Lagrange point. I was like, oh, wait a minute,
Yeah, wait a second. This is a different
hold up,
formula here. Let me.
we're cooking.
Nice. Yeah. I will have to say that I basically am the only thing I've been doing is that what you've been, that pretty much sums up what you've kind of been tackling, keeping your edge clean, as it were, and looking up space stuff.
Sure, just work, trying to get things moved forward.
Okay.
Work related, I'm writing a program unsolicited, but me and my
That's cool.
mentor are co-writing a program that wouldn't leave the company. It'd be for our internal use. But that's been a fun
That's
project.
good though.
Um,
Yeah.
getting back into programming a bit and learning some things and how to go about doing some different things. So
Yeah. No, that's a learn. Honestly, that's part of the exciting part of doing things at work when you get a new project or a new procedure you're really kind of delving into. We're going, wait a second, we can do this now. It's like, oh, I can use this to do other, you know, whatever
mhm.
things you probably had in your head, like, man, the software or the hardware or whatever it is doesn't really fit up to that. But like all of a sudden, something new comes out and you're like, wait a second, we can revisit this idea. This could help. Those are always, to me, they're the kind of exciting parts of doing work.
Well, the
Um,
exciting part with that was, and I won't spend too much time on it because it's a hobby podcast, not a work podcast. Uh, I call him my mentor. We were talking, and it revolves around some API calls, and basically I was like, well, we could do this thing, and he said, yeah, we can, but the system breaks. There's some rules in place that stop working when it's done this way. And I started doing some testing with it and was like, well, I think this might be why they're breaking. There's these missing fields that aren't documented, but they're there. And
ah,
from there, we're off to the races.
you're like, wait a second,
Yeah,
ding, ding, ding.
he perked up and he said, "Hold up, wait a minute,
Wait a minute. Nice. Nice.
let him
I'm
cook."
so glad you shared that with me, Joe.
Yeah,
Nice. Good. Well, that sounds, I know I'm looking forward to hearing how that project continues to shake out as you keep working through it, because I know you're really excited about it. It's really
yeah.
good stuff. Um,
So your turn.
mine was there's a looking at canards. Again, my head is still on a project that I was hoping to do this past summer. And this summer, it's basically a airborne aircraft carrier, Al, an RC one. So it's got to have a big, large platform to land on, big enough where if you're flying it from an FPV camera, and I had one here, but they're really small. So you can get a pretty small plane that kind of like zooms up. And then I wanted to have it land. But I figured if it's a canard configuration, it maintains a relative flatness. And then part of what I was thinking is if that works out, I might be able to, I'll call it, add the Prandtl twist to the ends to create a level, relatively shallow coordinated turn without rudder. Because the rudder is honestly genuinely in the way for these. Because if you're trying to keep a flat deck, either your rudders are down below, which makes landing difficult, which is part of what the history, the X-15 kind of discovered. Like, okay, we're gonna need this, but we're gonna have to just jettison it if we're gonna land. Like, just get rid of it. Like, okay, that's not what I want to do with my RC craft. But so my thought was, if I had a canard and if I had these wingtips, I wanted to play around with if I can get it to basically do what the Prandlt wing does as far as gentle turning. I'll have a nice long loiter craft, and if I can put some solar power to reduce the amount of net energy used, right? Keeping it a longer loiter time, that we might have a lot of fun with it at the flight festivals. Like literally I got a bunch of these like circle planes. I don't know if you can see them, but they're about, and basically have a bunch of discs that shoot out of the bottom. They go fly around and then they go try to land on the top. And then people just like, here, just take this controller. It goes to one of those planes up there. We're going to launch in 3, 2, 1, go. And then, have people have fun. I'd have FPV. I'd have a screen in front of me that has the FPV feeds from the different parts of the plane, and then just goof around with it for a couple hours at a festival, So that's the dream. So with that, I wanted to play with an aircraft or two that have known canards that succeed, right? So I've got one that basically, it's a glider. It's like some XTC. Is it Dale XTC? And it's basically, it looks like an X-wing fighter to a degree. There's a long wing. There's a V shape. And I'm not going to be able to pull it up because I won't find it anymore. We've been doing so many other things since then. But it's the same airfoil shape in the front and the little canard. And then it's a big, long, wide wing with an isosceles triangle in the back. And then so it creates like a V-tail effect for rudder control. And so I wanted to play with that. I figured it's a nice light thing, but I can also take that because it's the same shape throughout pretty much the entire length. I can also hot wire it out of XPS foam, which makes a really simple, once the setup is there, it makes it a real simple, quick build that I can give another go. I also wanted to test, is this lighter, the XPS foam, or making it out of Dollar Tree foam board, which is the lighter way to build it, right? Can't possibly just be okay with that I can build it, right? I have to figure out which is the better way, right?
What was the answer to that question?
I don't have an answer yet. My bow needed a new wire by the time I was ready to get to it.
Okay.
So I since purchased wire, but there have been holidays in between, and I haven't been able to get back to it. So and to that effect, I also hot wire cut, and we were talking about doing an XPS cut quickie with some of the formers and things like that, and then skinning it with foam, like a EPP foam or something like that. And I didn't use a wire cutting table, which would have been the best way. I thought if I have one side that's stable, I'm good. I could cut. It'll be great. What I didn't realize is hot knife through butter means there's no resistance on the other side, really. And so the backside is a wavy mess. So it's going to require a lot of sanding, a little bit more work than I anticipated. Again, the holidays came a little bit quicker for Thanksgiving. So I was just like, all right, we'll just put this over there. It's literally behind me here, but put it over there and I'll get to it in the next week. I'm going to have some time off in between the holidays here, between New Year's and stuff. So that's my plan, is to kind of work on that stuff. I'd love to get those models kind of checked out, find some successes so I can see if I can start implementing in January the rest of the ideas and getting a shape that I'm happy with to scale up. And by scale up, I'm talking, scale up like the wing in the back here. We're talking a 8-foot wingspan kind of deal, or 12 foot. For RC, that's huge. That's kind of like when you're looking at the big bird here, and these wings that you see on the side, Al, those are all Dollar Tree foam board. So they're the poster board you buy from the cheap store. So just trying to see how far we can go with it before it's like, okay, this is about it. At this point, you really do need to change materials. So
generally I think what we'll find is, so long as we have a way to initially get it up in the air, it'll be fine as long as it can support its own weight. Because once it's up there, the wings are supporting themselves, the central body, but
Yeah.
it's when you go to and pull a turn that you get that V force. That's
Oh
what you
yeah.
gotta be careful with.
That I mean, that's the fun part. That's where we say, is this bar designed well enough? Are the connections to the main body done strong enough?
I've not folded a plane yet.
Yeah, we haven't. The only time we busted the spars was when we landed hard,
Yes.
and one of the wingtips caught and just ripped it to pieces.
Yep.
So reasonable. Anyway, all right. There really isn't a whole lot past that. So I would love. I know we have a little bit of housekeeping. It is the 100th episode, so we have a giveaway today, and we will have a giveaway for those who are listening in our YouTube channel later. So today, if you are listening on our Discord channel and you've been a member of that community, you've had an opportunity to submit questions to Al or for Al to answer later. We are going to take one of you at random, and you are going to win a Gladiator, which is a flying wing from Windcatcher RC. So I could also say that this episode is sponsored in part by Windcatcher RC. Go to Windcatcher RC for all your carbon fiber and aeronautics paraphernalia. I don't know. They've got a lot of great stuff there. What was that?
Needs.
Yeah, exactly. He is one of the leading carbon fiber suppliers for a number of different kit makers in the United States, as well as kites and things like that. So, but his inventory extends well past that. So if you have anything that you are thinking about, go over there and see what he's got, because it's almost always a really good price. Lee is an excellent supporter of the hobby, supporter of us in particular. He's helped us out with a handful of little things here and there, and honestly, he's a great guy. So if you can, go over there, see what he can help you with. But we have 2 Gladiator kits we're giving away. One today, near the end of the show. Just listen in and you'll hear it. And then we will give the details on how you can do that later in the show. About when we post this to YouTube, we're going to have a way that you can participate, and then we will choose whoever's participated on YouTube. We'll select one of those at random, and then we'll give them a kit.
Yeah, and I think the reason for YouTube, one, this will be in a video format, but also it's a central platform.
It is, and it's our 100th episode. It's our 100th episode.
It only took us how many years to get here?
Let's not talk about that, Joe.
Well, real quick, before we move on to your history segment, speaking of sponsors, thank you, Lee from Windcatcher RC. Also, thank you to our patrons who continue to support us and help us keep the lights on. Things have been slow lately, but thank you for sticking with us, and hopefully soon things will start picking back up again. So
yeah, we really appreciate those who've continued to support us along this journey as we go during I'll call it this slowdown as we kind of reorient what we're doing. But more importantly, like, again, if you're listening, and you have been, as you get into this hobby, we really appreciate that you listen. We appreciate that you join the Discord. The community there is excellent. So I want a big shout out to our Discord community, who've really kind of been amazing ambassadors for new people in the hobby. And also, if you want, consider joining our Patreon. So if your support at Patreon helps keeps the website going and the lights on, and us looking forward to doing really dumb, stupid, fun projects that we have in the background here.
like the giant Noob Wonder.
Like the giant Noob Wonder, woo!
With 2 motors.
Yeah, it's a twin. Actually, I've recovered that video, so I'm going to be posting that soon. So look for that on YouTube.
I didn't know you lost the video.
Well, remember the whole computer crashed?
Right.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that were hard to find. So
okay, fair enough.
All right.